Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he climbed down into the basement level of the Veltari embassy. The air conditioning unit had been acting up again, and this was the third time this month he'd been called to fix it. Working as a maintenance mechanic for an alien embassy wasn't exactly what he dreamed of when he studied engineering, but the pay was incredible and the work was usually simple enough. He'd been doing this job for 2 years now, and he knew every corner of this building. Or at least he thought he did. The Veltari were strange beings, tall and graceful with skin that seemed to shimmer in the light, but they were polite enough. They kept to themselves mostly, attending diplomatic meetings and hosting cultural exchanges. Nothing unusual, nothing suspicious. Jake followed the ductwork through the basement corridor, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The embassy's backup generators hummed softly in the background. He was looking for Junction Box 7, which according to his tablet should be right around the next corner. But when he turned that corner, he stopped dead in his tracks. There was a hallway here, a hallway that wasn't on any of his blueprints or maintenance maps. He'd been working in this building for 2 years and never seen this passage before. The walls were different too. Everything the Veltari built had this smooth, flowing quality to it, like organic curves and gentle waves. But this hallway was straight and angular. Human architecture. His curiosity got the better of him. Jake knew he probably shouldn't go exploring, but something about this felt wrong. Very wrong. He walked slowly down the corridor, his footsteps echoing off the concrete walls. At the end of the passage stood a door. Not a Veltari door with its touch-sensitive panels and alien symbols, but a heavy steel door. Military-grade steel by the looks of it. The biometric lock on the door had been disabled. Someone had taken a plasma torch to it recently. He could see the fresh burn marks around the edges. The door was slightly ajar. Jake's heart started beating faster. Every instinct told him to turn around, go back upstairs, forget he'd ever seen this. But his hand was already pushing the door open. The room beyond took his breath away. It was massive, stretching back further than his flashlight could reach. Row after row of transparent cases lined the walls, and inside each case was technology. Human technology. Jake stepped closer, his mind racing. These weren't just random pieces of equipment. These were military systems, research prototypes, classified technology. He recognized a drone from the news last year. The experimental military drone that had vanished over the Atlantic Ocean. The government had searched for weeks, blamed it on a technical malfunction. But here it was, perfectly intact, sitting in a glass case with a label in Veltari script. Jake pulled out his phone and used the translation app. The label read, Retrieve Specimen, North Atlantic. Stealth capability analysis complete. His hand started shaking as he moved to the next case. A computer core from a defense satellite. Another case held what looked like an experimental weapon from a government research lab in Nevada. Case after case, stolen technology. Some pieces he recognized from news reports, others were completely unknown to him. All of it was human. All of it was supposed to be secure. Jake kept walking deeper into the archive, documenting everything with his phone's camera. His engineering background helped him identify most of the equipment. Advanced processors, weapon systems, propulsion technology, AI cores. This wasn't just collection. This was systematic theft on a massive scale. Then he noticed the dates on the labels. His blood ran cold. The earliest date he could see was from 53 years ago. 53 years. But humanity's first contact with the Veltari had only happened 18 years ago. That was when they'd arrived in their ships, announced themselves to the world, offered friendship and technological exchange. Everyone remembered it. It had been the biggest moment in human history. But these dates prove they'd been here long before that. Watching us, studying us, taking our technology while pretending they'd just arrived. The whole first contact story was a lie. Jake's mouth went dry as he moved into the next section. The cases here didn't contain technology. They contained biological samples, vials of human DNA, tissue cultures with ID numbers but no names. And in the back, in larger containment units, he saw something that made his stomach turn. Clones. Incomplete human clones suspended in some kind of fluid, their features disturbingly perfect but with subtle differences. Modifications. Veltari modifications. Next to the biological section was a database terminal. Jake's fingers trembled as he accessed it. Files and files of information. Psychological profiles of human leaders. Neural mapping data on thousands of people. Politicians, scientists, military commanders, all analyzed and cataloged. And then he found the war plans. Holographic displays flickered to life showing Earth's defense grids in perfect detail. Every military base, every satellite, every defense system. Attack scenarios with probability calculations. Resource allocation charts. Invasion timelines. The most recent file was dated 2 days ago, and it had a Veltari symbol that Jake had learned meant approved. They were going to invade Earth, and they'd been planning it for decades. Jake's heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. His hands wouldn't stop shaking as he tried to photograph the invasion plans with his phone. The holographic display showed Earth's defenses in terrifying detail, every weakness highlighted, every vulnerability marked. He had to get this information out. People needed to know what was coming. He was backing away from the terminal when the alarm started. A sharp, piercing sound that made his teeth hurt. The lights in the archive shifted from white to a deep red color. Jake had heard this alarm before during drills, but never for real. It was the embassy's security lockdown protocol. They knew he was here. A calm voice began speaking in Veltari through the overhead speakers. Jake's translation app picked it up. Unauthorized human detected in restricted zone. Containment procedures initiated. Security teams en route. Jake didn't wait to hear the rest. He ran. The steel door slammed shut behind him as he burst into the corridor. He could hear mechanical locks engaging throughout the building, sealing sections one by one. He had maybe 8 minutes before the Veltari security forces arrived from their military compound across town. 8 minutes to get out of a locked building that was designed to keep intruders trapped inside. But Jake had one advantage that the Veltari didn't know about. He'd been maintaining this building system for 2 years. He knew things about this embassy that even most of the Veltari staff didn't know. Every maintenance shaft, every ventilation duct, every emergency override, every blind spot in the security camera network. He'd crawled through most of this building at one point or another fixing things. He sprinted down the hallway toward the main basement area. The elevator was already locked down, red lights flashing above it. The stairwell door was sealed tight, but 20 feet to his left was a ventilation grate. Jake pulled out his multi-tool and started removing screws as fast as his shaking hands would allow. The grate came free, and he hauled himself up into the duct. The metal was cold against his skin as he crawled through the narrow space. He could hear footsteps below him now, security personnel searching the basement. Their voices were urgent, barking orders in their language. Jake moved as quietly as he could, following the path he'd memorized from countless repair jobs. This duct would take him up 2 floors and come out near the embassy's ceremonial garden. Sweat dripped into his eyes as he crawled. The duct was barely wide enough for his shoulders. His phone kept digging into his ribs where he'd shoved it in his pocket. That phone had everything. Photos, videos, files he'd downloaded. Proof of what the Veltari were planning. He couldn't let them catch him. Couldn't let them delete this evidence. After what felt like forever, he reached a grate that opened into a maintenance closet on the ground floor. Jake kicked it open and dropped down, landing hard on the concrete floor. His ankle twisted and pain shot up his leg, but adrenaline kept him moving. He limped out of the closet into a hallway. The embassy was chaos. Alarms were still blaring. He could see Veltari staff members looking confused, some being evacuated by security. None of them paid attention to him. Just another human worker caught in the lockdown. Jake tried to look calm as he headed toward the garden entrance, but his heart was racing. The garden was the embassy's showpiece, full of plants from the Veltari homeworld mixed with earth flowers. During the day, tourists could visit. But right now it was empty except for 2 security guards standing between Jake and the exit gate. They were tall, even for Veltari, with 4 arms each and weapons that glowed with blue energy. They weren't looking at him yet, focused on securing the perimeter. Jake's mind raced. He couldn't fight them, couldn't talk his way past them. He needed a distraction. His eyes landed on his tool belt, the power scanner he used for checking electrical systems. If he overloaded the battery, it would create a small explosion. Dangerous, but he was out of options. He pulled the scanner from his belt and adjusted the settings, pushing it way beyond safe limits. The device started humming and heating up in his hand. Jake counted to 3, then hurled it as hard as he could toward the embassy's main transformer box near the wall. The explosion was louder than he expected. Sparks flew everywhere as the transformer erupted. Every light in the embassy went dark. Emergency systems kicked in, but for a few crucial seconds, there was confusion. Alarms changed pitch. The guards spun toward the explosion, their weapons raised. Jake didn't think. He just ran. His twisted ankles screamed in protest, but he ignored it. He sprinted across the garden, grabbed the top of the decorative wall, and hauled himself over. He landed on the sidewalk outside just as he heard shouting behind him. The streets of Washington, D.C. were busy even at this hour. Jake pushed into the crowd of pedestrians, trying to blend in. He was just another guy in work clothes heading home. Nothing suspicious. But when he glanced back, he saw them. 3 Veltari security personnel emerging from the embassy, their heads scanning the crowd. They were searching for him. Jake ducked into an alley and started running again. His lungs burned. His ankle was agony, but he couldn't stop. He pulled out his phone as he ran, typing out an encrypted message to the Earth Defense Force headquarters. Everything he'd found, everything he'd photographed, but he couldn't send it yet. The moment he transmitted, the Veltari would track his signal. They'd know exactly where he was. He needed to reach a secure location first. The nearest EDF safe house was 12 blocks away. Jake had memorized this location during his security training when he first got the embassy job. All contractors working at alien facilities had to know where the safe houses were. He'd never thought he'd actually need to use one. The streets blurred as he ran. People stared at him, this wild-eyed man limping and running like his life depended on it. Because it did. Behind him, he heard a sound that made his blood freeze. The distinctive whisper hum of Veltari pursuit craft. Small flying vehicles that could navigate city streets. They were hunting him from the air now. Jake dove under an overpass just as blue energy fire scorched the pavement where he'd been standing a second ago. Chunks of concrete exploded. People screamed and scattered. He kept running, weaving between cars, cutting through buildings, anything to break line of sight with the aircraft above. His phone buzzed. An incoming call from an unknown number. Jake ignored it. Had to keep moving. The safe house was close now. Just 3 more blocks. 2 blocks. He could see it ahead, an ordinary-looking townhouse with a red door. More energy fire streaked past him, so close he felt the heat. Jake threw himself forward in a desperate dive, hit the pavement hard, and rolled. The safe house door was right there. He scrambled up the steps on his hands and knees and slammed into the door. It opened automatically, recognizing his biometric signature. Jake tumbled inside as plasma fire scorched the doorframe behind him. The door sealed shut with a heavy thunk. He heard the building's defensive systems activating, electromagnetic shielding powering up. He was safe. For now. Jake lay on the floor gasping for breath, his entire body shaking. His phone was still clutched in his hand. He looked at it, at all the evidence stored inside, and pressed send. The message uploaded to every Earth Defense Force headquarters on the planet. There was no taking it back now. Within minutes, people would know what he'd found. Within hours, everything would change. Jake lay on the cold floor of the safe house, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. His ankle throbbed with pain, and his hands were scraped raw from his dive through the door. But he was alive. He'd made it. The electromagnetic shielding hummed softly around the building, creating an invisible barrier that would block any tracking signals or weapons fire. At least for a while. His phone buzzed constantly now. Messages flooding in from Earth Defense Force command centers around the world. They'd received his transmission. They'd seen the evidence. Within 30 seconds of catching his breath, the safe house's communication system activated on its own. A holographic screen appeared in the air in front of him, and a stern-looking woman in a military uniform stared out at him. "Jake Morrison?" she asked sharply. "Yes, ma'am," Jake managed to say between gasps. "This is Commander Helen Roberts at EDF Central Command. We've received your transmission. A security team is en route to your location. Stay where you are. Do not leave the building under any circumstances. Do you understand?" Jake nodded. "How long until they get here?" 18 minutes. Can you hold that long?" Outside, Jake heard the whine of Veltari aircraft circling the building. "I don't think I have much choice." The next 18 minutes felt like 18 hours. Jake used the safe house's first aid kit to wrap his ankle and clean his cuts. He could hear activity outside, voices in Veltari, the sound of vehicles arriving. They were surrounding the building, but they couldn't get in. Not yet. The safe house was designed to withstand a siege for up to 6 hours. When the EDF security team finally arrived, Jake heard the distinctive sound of human military vehicles pulling up outside, shouting. A brief exchange of what sounded like threats between the human soldiers and Veltari security forces. Then the safe house door opened and 6 armed soldiers rushed in, forming a protective circle around Jake. "Let's move," the team leader said. "We've got a convoy waiting." They hustled Jake outside into an armored vehicle. Through the tinted windows, he could see Veltari security personnel standing back, their weapons lowered but their expressions hostile. The human and alien forces were in a standoff on a Washington, D.C. street, and somehow Jake was at the center of it. The convoy drove for 40 minutes, taking random turns and doubling back several times to lose any potential followers. Finally, they entered what looked like an ordinary parking garage. But the vehicle kept going down, past the regular parking levels, through a security checkpoint with armed guards, and into an elevator that descended for what felt like forever. They were taking him deep underground. When the elevator finally stopped, Jake found himself in a massive command center carved out of solid rock. Screens covered every wall, showing maps, data feeds, and live footage from around the world. Hundreds of people worked at terminals, their faces focused and intense. This was the kind of place most people didn't even know existed. A man in a crisp military uniform approached. His name tag read General Patterson. Behind him came an older woman in a business suit and a man with admiral's insignia. They looked tired and worried. "Mr. Morrison," the general said, shaking Jake's hand firmly. "I'm General Patterson. This is Defense Secretary Williams and Admiral Brooks. We need you to tell us everything. Start from the beginning." They led him into a conference room where more officials were gathering. Jake recognized some faces from news broadcasts. Important people. Decision makers. They all looked at him with a mixture of urgency and something else. Fear. Maybe. For the next hour, Jake told them everything. Finding the hidden corridor, the steel door, the archive of stolen technology, the biological samples and clone experiments, the war plans. He showed them the photos and videos on his phone, and the technical staff immediately began analyzing them on the large screens around the room. The room grew quieter as the evidence played out. Jake watched their faces as they saw what he'd seen. The stolen military equipment, the decades of secret observation, the detailed invasion plans. When the holographic war plans appeared on the screen, showing Earth's defenses mapped out with terrifying accuracy, someone in the room cursed under their breath. "How much time do we have?" Defense Secretary Williams asked. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the tension in it. "The file was mark-approved 2 days ago," Jake said. "I don't know what their timeline is, but it looked ready to execute. Could be days, could be hours." Admiral Brooks was studying the defense analysis the Veltari had compiled. "They know where 73% of our military installations are located. They've mapped our satellite network better than we have. They know our response times, our protocols, our weak points." He looked up at the others. "If they attack with this level of intelligence, we're looking at a coordinated strike that could cripple our defenses before we even know we're under attack." "Then we're finished," someone said from the back of the room. "No." The voice came from a woman Jake hadn't noticed before. She stepped forward, and her uniform identified her as Director Miller from EDF Intelligence. "We're not finished, because now we know that they know." The moment Mr. Morrison transmitted his evidence, the situation changed. The Veltari will have to assume we're taking countermeasures. Their intelligence is compromised. "But we don't have countermeasures," another official protested. "Our military was designed to keep peace between human nations, not fight off a technologically advanced alien invasion." "Says who?" General Patterson said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. He was staring at the screens with an expression Jake couldn't quite read. "We've been working with alien species for 18 years. You think we just trusted them? You think we didn't prepare for the possibility that things might go wrong?" Defense Secretary Williams nodded slowly. "The general's right. We need to go public with this information. The other alien species, the ones in the Galactic Assembly, the Draconians, the Collective, the Arkans, they need to know what the Veltari have been doing. Breaking first contact protocols, illegally gathering intelligence, planning aggressive expansion against a protected developing species. That'll take time, Admiral Brooks said. Time we might not have. Jake spoke up, surprising himself. Then don't just sit here talking about it. Do something. Anything. I'm just a mechanic, and I managed to get this evidence out of their embassy. Your Earth Defense Force. You're telling me you don't have plans for this? The room went silent for a moment. Then General Patterson smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. Actually, Mr. Morrison, we do. We've had them for quite a while. He turned to his staff. Activate Protocol Hawk. Every hidden installation, every black site, every asset we've kept off the books. I want them all online within the hour. All of them, sir, Anade asked, looking shocked. Every single one. It's time the Veltari learned something about humanity. Patterson looked around the room at the other officials. We're good at keeping secrets, too. Maybe better than they realize. Admiral Brooks was already on his communicator, giving orders in rapid succession. Defense Secretary Williams was composing messages to other world leaders. The room exploded into coordinated action. Jake sat back in his chair, exhausted and overwhelmed. Less than 3 hours ago, he'd been fixing an air conditioning unit. Now he was in an underground bunker watching humanity prepare for possible war with an alien species. His phone buzzed again. A message from his sister asking if he was coming to dinner this weekend. The normal world seemed so far away now. But as he watched the military officials working with grim determination, Jake felt something unexpected. Hope. These people weren't panicking. They weren't giving up. They were fighting back. Humanity had survived worse odds before. Maybe they could survive this too. General Patterson noticed him sitting there. Get some rest, Morrison. You've done your part. Let us handle it from here. Jake nodded but didn't move. He'd started this. He wanted to see how it ended. The next 72 hours changed everything humanity thought it knew about itself. Jake stayed in the underground command center, watching it all unfold on the massive screens that covered the walls. He'd been given a security clearance that would have been impossible to get under normal circumstances. But these weren't normal circumstances. The evidence he'd found had turned him from a simple mechanic into someone at the center of the biggest crisis humanity had ever faced. The first move happened within 2 hours of his initial briefing. Defense Secretary Williams appeared on every news channel simultaneously, broadcasting to the entire planet. Jake watched as she calmly explained what the Veltari had been doing. The decades of secret observation, the stolen technology, the biological experiments, the invasion plans. She showed edited versions of Jake's evidence, enough to prove the threat was real without revealing Earth's most sensitive military secrets. The world reacted with shock and anger. Within an hour, protests erupted outside every Veltari facility on Earth. But that was just the beginning. What happened next was what really mattered. Williams transmitted the full evidence package to every member species of the Galactic Assembly. All 4 to 7 alien civilizations that made up the interstellar community received detailed documentation of what the Veltari had done. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Species after species condemned the Veltari actions. Breaking first contact protocols was one of the most serious violations in galactic law. Planning military action against a protected developing world was even worse. But while diplomacy played out on the galactic stage, something else was happening closer to home. Something Jake didn't expect. General Patterson stood at the main command console, giving orders that seemed to make no sense at first. Activate Crater Base. Bring Longshot Station online. Wake up the Mars assets. Get me a status report from Asteroid Station 7. Jake had never heard of any of these installations. He leaned toward a young officer standing nearby. What's Crater Base? The officer glanced at him, then seemed to remember Jake now had clearance to know. Moon Base. But not the one tourists know about. The real one. There's a secret moon base. There's a lot of secret bases, sir. We've been building them since first contact, just in case things went bad. The officer pointed at one of the screens. Watch. The screen showed a live feed from the moon. Jake recognized a commercial research station he'd seen in documentaries, with its distinctive dome and solar panels. But then the camera panned to the left, showing a section of the lunar surface that looked like just another crater. Except it wasn't. As Jake watched, the crater floor began to open. Massive doors slid aside, revealing a facility that went deep underground. And rising from that facility were weapons. Huge railguns that could hit targets in orbit or on Earth with devastating accuracy. "How long has that been there?" Jake asked, his voice barely a whisper. 14 years. Built it in secret while everyone was focused on the tourist base. Another screen lit up, this one showing Mars. The colony that was supposed to be a scientific outpost with maybe 500 researchers. But as Jake watched, entire sections of the red planet's surface opened up. What emerged wasn't research equipment. It was warships. Sleek, deadly-looking vessels that had been hidden underground, waiting. There were dozens of them. Admiral Brooks was coordinating with the Mars Fleet commander. "How long until you're ready for deployment?" "Ships are fully fueled and armed, sir. Crews are boarding now. We can launch in 90 minutes. Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. "We have a fleet on Mars? An actual military fleet?" General Patterson overheard him. "We have assets all over the solar system, Morrison. Humanity didn't survive this long by being stupid. When the Veltari showed up 18 years ago, offering friendship and technology, most people were excited. But some of us asked the harder questions. What if they're not friendly? What if this goes wrong?" So we prepared. More screens activated, showing facilities Jake had never imagined existed. Asteroid mining stations that weren't really mining anything. There were weapons platforms with enough firepower to destroy approaching fleets. Satellites that everyone thought were for communications or weather monitoring, but were actually kinetic bombardment systems that could drop tungsten rods from orbit with the force of nuclear weapons. A commercial space station that tourists visited, but hidden inside it was a command center and weapons array that could defend Earth's orbital space. Research submarines in Earth's oceans that were actually housing advanced defense systems. Even some of the large corporate buildings in major cities had hidden military functions, their basements converted into command centers or weapons storage. "How did you keep all this secret?" Jake asked. "How did nobody know?" Director Miller answered that one. "People knew pieces of it, but nobody except a handful of people knew the whole picture. We compartmentalized everything. The workers building the moon base thought they were constructing a backup research facility. The Mars fleet crews thought they were testing long-range exploration vessels. Everyone involved knew their small part, but not the bigger plan. And the Veltari never suspected. They were too busy congratulating themselves on how clever they were," Patterson said with a grim smile. "They thought they were the only ones keeping secrets. They studied our official military, our public installations, our known capabilities. They never imagined we'd be doing the exact same thing to them, learning from them while building our own hidden defenses." Over the next 24 hours, more and more humanity's secret strength revealed itself. Jake learned that Earth's actual military capability was nearly triple what the Veltari thought it was. That human ships, while not as advanced as Veltari technology, had been designed specifically to counter Veltari weapons based on years of secret analysis. He learned that human scientists had been reverse engineering alien technology since first contact, not just learning from what the aliens taught them, but secretly studying everything they could get their hands on. Every piece of alien equipment that came to Earth had been thoroughly analyzed. Every visiting alien ship had been scanned with sensors the aliens didn't know existed. On the second day, long-range sensors picked up something that made everyone in the command center go tense. A Veltari fleet had entered the outer solar system. 30 warships, moving in formation toward Earth. The invasion was happening. But something was different from what the Veltari expected. Instead of finding a defenseless planet that would panic at the sight of their fleet, they found themselves facing a coordinated defense network that shouldn't have existed. The moon base's railguns locked onto their ships. The Mars fleet launched and moved to intercept. Weapons platforms throughout the asteroid belt activated. Earth's orbital defense systems came online. Not the weak systems of Veltari knew about, but the real ones that had been hidden for over a decade. And it wasn't just human forces. Ships from other alien species began arriving too. The Draconians sent a battle group to support Earth. The collective dispatched defensive platforms. Even species that had been neutral were sending support, outraged at the Veltari's violation of galactic law. Jake watched it all on the screens, his heart pounding. The Veltari fleet had stopped advancing. They were just sitting there at the edge of the solar system, clearly not expecting any of this. Their perfect intelligence had told them Earth would be easy prey. Instead, they were looking at a fight they might not win. They are requesting communication, a communications officer announced. General Patterson nodded. Put them through. The main screen shifted to show a Veltari commander on the bridge of their flagship. He looked different from the polite, calm aliens Jake had worked with at the embassy. This one looked shocked and afraid. This is Commander Veltov of the Veltari Expeditionary Fleet. The alien said stiffly, "We were not informed that it possessed such extensive military capabilities." "That was kind of the point," Patterson replied coldly. "You thought you knew everything about us. You were wrong." The Veltari commander's skin shifted through several colors, a sign of emotional distress. "We have underestimated humanity. This was an error." "An error?" Admiral Brooke stepped forward, his voice hard. "You've been spying on us for 50 years, stealing our technology, experimenting on human DNA, planning an invasion, and you call it an error." Jake felt a surge of satisfaction watching the aliens squirm. These beings who had seemed so superior, so advanced, were suddenly looking very different. The Veltari commander's image filled the main screen, and Jake could see the alien was struggling to maintain composure. His skin kept shifting colors in ways that betrayed his emotional state. Fear, confusion, and something else that Jake recognized from his time working at the embassy. Shame. "We were operating under outdated intelligence," Commander Veltov said carefully. "Our projections indicated that Earth's defensive capabilities were limited to basic orbital platforms and conventional military forces." Admiral Brooke stepped forward, his face hard. "Your projections were based on stolen intelligence gathered over 50 years of illegal observation. You violated every first contact protocol in the Galactic Charter. You experimented on human genetic material without consent. You planned an unprovoked military invasion of a protected world." His voice got louder with each sentence. "And now you want to call it outdated intelligence." The Veltari commander's skin flickered through several more colors. On another screen, Jake could see tactical displays showing the positions of both fleets. The Veltari had 30 warships, impressive by most standards, but they were now surrounded by human defensive platforms, facing the Mars fleet from one direction, and had ships from 6 other alien species positioned around them. They were trapped. "We believed we were acting in the best interest of galactic stability." Veltov tried again. Earth's rapid technological advancement presented certain risks that the Confluence felt needed to be managed. Managed? Defense Secretary Williams' voice cut through the comm channel. She'd been coordinating with world leaders, but now stepped into view of the camera. "You mean controlled? You saw a young species that were developing faster than you expected, and instead of helping us like you claimed, you decided to conquer us before we became a threat to your power." Jake watched the Veltari commander closely. The alien's eyes darted to something off-screen, probably consulting with his superiors. This wasn't just a military commander making decisions. This was someone caught in a situation that had gone completely wrong, trying to find a way out. "What are your terms?" Veltov finally asked. General Patterson glanced at Williams and Admiral Brooks. They'd clearly discussed this possibility. "First, your fleet withdraws immediately to beyond the outer system boundary. Second, every Veltari facility on Earth is shut down, and your diplomatic staff leaves within 72 hours. Third, you return every piece of stolen human technology and destroy all biological samples and research data you've collected." "That is acceptable," Veltov said quickly. Too quickly. "I'm not finished," Patterson continued. "Fourth, you will provide full disclosure to the Galactic Assembly about the extent of your intelligence operations against Earth. Fifth, the Veltari Confluence will pay reparation for damages and violations of galactic law. And sixth, you will have no direct contact with Earth or human colonies for the next 25 years. Any future diplomatic relations will be supervised by the Galactic Assembly." The Veltari commander's skin went pale. "Those terms are extremely harsh." The Confluence Council will never agree to complete isolation from Earth. Your world has resources and strategic value that you wanted to steal, Williams interrupted. Those are our terms. Non-negotiable. You have 1 hour to get approval from your council. If your fleet hasn't begun withdrawing by then, we'll consider it an act of war. The screen went dark as Williams cut the connection. The command center erupted in nervous chatter. Jake sat back in his chair, his heart pounding. They'd just issued an ultimatum to a species that was supposed to be far more advanced than humanity. It was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Do you think they'll accept? Jake asked the young officer who'd been explaining things to him. The officer shrugged. They don't have much choice. Their fleet is surrounded. They are facing sanction from the Galactic Assembly, and they just found out that the primitive species that were planning to invade has been preparing for this exact scenario for nearly 2 decades. Their options are accept our terms or start a war they probably can't win. The next hour was the longest of Jake's life. The command center was busy with activity as military personnel monitored every sensor, every communication channel, every movement of the Veltari fleet. On the diplomatic screens, Jake could see representatives from other alien species gathering for an emergency session of the Galactic Assembly. The humans had sent their evidence to everyone, and now the entire galaxy was watching to see what would happen. 4 to 7 minutes after the ultimatum, the Veltari flagship sent another transmission request. General Patterson accepted it immediately. This time, it wasn't Commander Veltov on the screen. It was a different Veltari, older-looking with elaborate markings on his skin that indicated high rank. I am Council Elder Morveth, speaking on behalf of the Veltari Confluence. We have reviewed your terms. Everyone in the command center held their breath. We accept, the Elder said simply. Our fleet will begin withdrawal immediately. Our diplomatic facilities on Earth will be evacuated within the specified time frame. We will comply with all requirements regarding the return of appropriated materials and the disclosure of our intelligence operations. Jake heard someone let out a long breath of relief. But the Elder wasn't finished. However, I must state for the record that the Veltari Confluence believed it was acting to prevent potential instability. We did not anticipate that humanity had developed such sophisticated defensive capabilities, nor did we understand the extent of your strategic planning. The Elder's skin shifted to a color Jake had never seen before. We underestimated you. That was our failure, and we acknowledge it. It wasn't quite an apology, but coming from a species that had spent 50 years treating humans like children who needed supervision, it was something. Over the next 6 hours, Jake watched as the Veltari fleet slowly toned and began the journey back out of the solar system. The human forces and allied alien ships maintained their positions, making sure the Veltari actually left. There was no trust in them all. That had been destroyed the moment Jake opened that steel door. On Earth, Veltari diplomats and staff began evacuating their facilities. News cameras captured them loading equipment and belongings onto transport ships, their movements rushed and their expressions showing clear discomfort. Protesters lined the streets outside the embassies, but human security kept them back. There was anger, yes, but also a strange sense of pride. Humanity had stood up to a threat, and won without firing a single shot. The Galactic Assembly convened and formally censured the Veltari Confluence for violating first contact protocols. They imposed sanctions and trade restrictions. Several species that had been allied with the Veltari announced they were reconsidering those relationships. The political fallout was massive. But something else happened too. Something Jake hadn't expected. Other alien species started looking at humanity differently. Not as a young, naive species that needed guidance and protection, but as a civilization that had proven it could defend itself, that could plan ahead, that could keep secrets and play the long game just as well as species that had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. 3 days after the standoff, Jake was called back to the main conference room. General Patterson, Defense Secretary Williams, Admiral Brooks, and Director Miller were all there, along with several other officials he recognized from news broadcasts. Mr. Morrison, Williams began, what you did took courage. Finding that evidence, getting it out of the embassy, risking your life to warn us. You saved Earth. We want you to know that. Jake felt his face flush. I just did what anyone would do. No, Patterson said firmly. Most people would have walked away. would have convinced themselves they didn't see what they saw, would have been too scared to act. You didn't do that. You trusted your instincts and you acted on them. That's what made the difference. They offered him a position with Earth Defense Force. A real job, not just as consultant, working with the teams that would continue analyzing alien technology and helping to improve Earth's defenses. The pay was excellent, but more than that, it was a chance to be part of something important. Jake accepted. 6 months later, Jake stood in a new facility built specifically to house recovered alien technology and to develop countermeasures to potential threats. He was leading a team of engineers analyzing the equipment the Veltari had been forced to return. Every day brought new discoveries about how they'd been spying, what they'd learned, and how humanity could protect itself better in the future. But sometimes, late at night when the facility was quiet, Jake thought about that day in the embassy basement. About the steel door that shouldn't have been there. About the choice he'd made to open it instead of walking away. One decision by one person had changed everything. It had exposed a threat, prevented an invasion, and forced humanity to reveal strengths they'd kept hidden for nearly 2 decades. It had reshaped Earth's relationship with every species in the galaxy, all because a mechanic trusted his gut and opened the door. The Veltari were gone now, their influence broken and their reputation damaged. The galaxy knew that humanity wasn't helpless, that humans could defend themselves, that they'd been quietly preparing for threats while everyone assumed they were naive and trusting. And most importantly, every species out there now understood one crucial fact about humanity. They understood that humans were patient, that they could wait and watch and prepare for years if necessary, that they didn't show all their cards until the moment it mattered most. Earth was no longer seen as a protected world that needed supervision. It was recognized as a power that had earned its place in the galaxy through vigilance, preparation, and the courage to stand up when threatened. Jake looked at his reflection in the lab window, seeing himself in his new EDF uniform. Just a mechanic who'd stumbled onto something big. But sometimes that's all it took. One person in the right place at the right time, willing to act instead of looking away. The stars visible through the window seemed different now. Less mysterious, maybe, but somehow more real. Humanity had learned a hard lesson about trust in the universe. But they'd also learned something about themselves. They were stronger than they'd thought, more capable, more prepared, and if another threat ever came, they'd be ready